heritage plan, arts plan, recreation and play plan, community support plan, the city library plan, the community safety and health plan, the climate change and sustainability plan, the Manawatu biodiversity and Manawatu awa or river plan, resource recovery plan, the water plan, the governance and active leadership plan, and the social housing guidelines in attachment 3. Number 3, that Council adopt the revenue and financing policy 2024 included in attachment 6. Number 4, that Council adopt the rates remission and postponement policies 2024 attachment 4. Number 5, that Council adopt the development contributions policy 2024 attachment 5. Number 6, that Council adopt the significance and engagement policy 2024 included in attachment 6. Number 7, that Council adopt the long-term plan itself 2024-34 attachment 6. And that 8, Council confirm the adoption of the city strategy and long-term plan 2024-34 LTP as significant decisions, and that the Council confirm it has developed the strategy and LTP in compliance with the decision-making and consultation requirements of the LGA 2002. And number 9, that Council delegate authority to the Chief Executive to authorise payments to the Council-controlled organisations and other external organisations generally in accordance with their respective statements of intent. I'm happy to move that, seconded by Councillor Dennison. Councillors, huge amount of work's gone on, and it would be fair to say it's a challenging time. But I just want to acknowledge everybody that has been involved. Firstly, the submitters, and to get in excess of 1,400 plus submissions is evidence that people are interested in what is going on. Admittedly, we had some subjects that would probably provoke a bit of that around, obviously, rates, but how we rate. But also just where we're at a challenging time. I acknowledge the team that led out the LTP. For you, it's the end of an excess of 12 to 15 months of work. Can I acknowledge you, Debbie, and the Audit Office? Thank you. Also, my colleagues. A lot of debate. I've lost track of the amount of meetings that we've had on this, but there was hearings after hearings after hearings, and then 3 full days of deliberations. I'm comfortable with myself and myself that we have got to a balanced view. Yes, we've got some ability to change things if we need to. The 2 big things that audit spoke about, and it was good to hear from the auditor that we do have some levers to change things if we need to. But there's some significance around how we treat the funding of the earthquake-prone buildings, and we ultimately have some choices there, and how we deliver those services. But essentially, it's around the buildings that those services are carried out in. We then, obviously, the big one is around the nature calls, the resource water plant, and how we treat that as a council, and actually how councils around us treat it as well, because I'm sure that there will be, excuse the pun, but more water to go under the bridge around perhaps regional entities and how things are handled in a catchment basis too. So I'm comfortable where we've got to. Nobody likes increasing rates, but I think you just need to go around the country, and I'd probably say we are probably one of the in the lower quartile, and definitely our rates are in the lower quartile as well, even compared to some of our neighbours. But in saying that, there's still hard work to go. We do have some options and some levers to accelerate things, but in most cases perhaps push back on a few things. But I'd like your support on this. It's been a lot of work, and I think in balance we've found a reasonable space compared to the challenging circumstances we're faced with. So I'll open it up for comments. Councillor Dennison.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I'll too, as a seconder, support this plan, although make some note of some high-level concern. First off, I do want to make the experience for me is that this has been one of the most challenging plans we've had to navigate and to end up with. And that's because of the obvious pressing concerns around the cost of living and the interest rates for mortgages and the cost of rent and produce, everything else like that. But for us, it is the engagement with our community that we've got with a lot of new people coming to submit with their concerns around some of the things that we were proposing. And I do feel like we've adjusted a number of fronts, but there's still some pressing things which come through clearly in the auditor's report with this. The effect ultimately is unsupportable and highly uncertain assumptions, and I'd agree with that. There's some things that I think that moving through year by year we'll still have to adjust and keep a very clear eye and line of sight of the affordability and doability of our plan. The cost of infrastructure is one. It's almost flawed on some of the figures that are coming through for the contingency costs, consultants' costs, and even in recent disclosures on how much to move a bus stop, showing that there's all of those costs add up more than actually doing the work, which is absurd. And so if that's played out and extrapolated across our other infrastructure projects, there's some real concern around the market has just gone nuts on local authorities as far as what the tendering process produces as far as cost to do the work. And I think that too will have some realism put into the space as we move through in these next couple of years. The Nature Calls project is one that generated a lot of feedback, and I want to make comments on this. When we reduced the budget down to 480 million, I thought that was a significant decision to reduce the proposed budget, which I thought was through the roof and really unrealistic at the 647 million. Just eye-watering. But even at 480, I think that generates a real concern moving forward, and so I was comfortable at a lower figure. But the fact that I want to raise of concern is that we start funding this off a special purpose vehicle, the IFF levy, off the books, is unprecedented for this council in the past, and this is a milestone moment to agree to something like this going forward, and I don't want to do that without raising the concern of the line of sight on what impact that has on the affordability and the assumptions around our debt to equity ratios, because it starts not getting measured in the same way. And so I think we need to do some more work on over these next couple of years to actually make sure we've got some consideration of that for the line of sight, especially that we're not just using it for Nature Calls, it's also proposed for other projects like Te Manawa and the library and the like, and I just can't see how that's sustainable. So that would be a subsequent point. And the other one, as far as having milestone moments for the city, is the move towards capital value to striking rates. And over the next 3 years, as we move to a 50-50 hybrid, I think that's a really it's timely move, and I think that's one that the community have voiced a desire for when you summarise the who sat where on those submissions. But it also brings us towards a step of change towards what majority of other local authorities are doing. So again, I wanted to acknowledge that point. And then I think it's only fair to acknowledge the staff with the enormous amount of hours, and we've already done our future development strategy work. Many of the planners were involved with that. But this has been a huge effort from staff. But also I want to acknowledge you as colleagues. I think we got through some pretty contentious issues. I mentioned this at our last debate. I actually think we navigated this very, very well. So I want to attribute your contribution and your approach to the deliberations. It's not without saying, it was done very, very well and considerately as far as respecting people's views but debating the issues. Pretty robustly, but I think we could all be satisfied we had a fair say and respected what people had to say. So those are my comments, Mr. Mayor. Thank you.
Councillor Wood.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I didn't plan on speaking third, but nobody else is putting themselves in the queue, so I'm glad a few more people have jumped in. I want to start on a positive note and recognise the compromise and work that's gone into getting us to this stage on behalf of our officers and on behalf of councillors to get here. We have reduced some of the nice-to-have spending in this plan as a result of submissions from our community. Cycleways, shared pathways, the Awapuni Library are just a few to name, which resulted, to my calculation, a $140.7 million reduction of our on-balance sheet spending. There's also some really good new stuff in this plan. We're upping our renewal spend so that we can start to get it slowly on top of the transport deficit that we have in this city. We're finally giving stormwater the love that it needs, investing not only in network reviews, but also investing in significant additional infrastructure to go behind that. So there is some positive and really valued and needed stuff in this plan. And I've been umming and ahhing for the last few weeks as to whether I'll vote for or against this, but ultimately the conclusion I've came to is that we have not gone far enough. And that's not to say that we haven't done anything. I fully respect the work that our council has done. But in the consultation document, we proposed in the first 3 years a 34.9% increase to rates. Where we're at today is a 30.1% increase, so just under 5% reduction. Our overall rates income over the 10 years will go from 1.995 billion to 1.941 billion from our community. If we hadn't increased rates at all, it would have been at 1.242 billion, so the actual additional revenue we're talking about here went from 753 additional revenue down to 699, a $54 million reduction. I supported over $134 million of reductions in this order to the plan. I firmly believe that a 30% increase in rates over the next 3 years and 108% over the course of the 10 years, plus a wastewater treatment plant levy of at least $1,000, is going to be cold comfort for a solo mum whose mortgage has just gone up, her power's gone up, and now her rates are up. It's going to be cold comfort for a young couple who's renting, trying to scrape together enough for a deposit whose utility costs and rate costs have eaten into their ability to save for that first deposit. It's going to be cold comfort for a retiree on a fixed income whose power and gas bills just went up and they're hit with an extra $30 or $40 per fortnight in 3 years' time just on their rates bill alone. I believe this could be done. The Far North, as an example, decreased their consultated rates or consultation document rates from 16.5% down to 5.1%, in part by a year one reduction of $8.5 million in operational spending. We made a $1.4 million reduction, with proposals that totalled about $2.8 million. So on top of all of that, an audit opinion today which says that they don't believe our plan is reasonable or supportable and that our assumptions are highly uncertain and not supportable by audit, tips me to a point that I'm sorry, councillors, I cannot vote in favour of this plan. I voted for the annual budget last year, some of you will recall, despite the fact that I didn't believe the compromise got to where it needed to, but in the spirit of the compromise that we made in this chamber. So I'm not just voting against this for the sake of this, but I genuinely do not believe that what we've got in front of us today is fundable, is affordable, or is what our community asked for through the consultation process. And I will live in hope that this plan can be made better through the annual budget process and that some of the horrific rate predictions and wastewater levy predictions don't come to pass. I appreciate we've got a chance to change this, and I certainly hope we do.
Councillor Zabellan.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Apologies, I'm a little bit croaky. I'm very extraordinarily grateful to have had this opportunity to go through this process and to try and represent our community fairly, and I'm really so mindful and thankful for all the hours of work and the immense pressure that our officers have been under. I think you are a great team of great individuals, and it's been just fabulous to have you behind us every step of the way. Particular shout out to Cam and Scott and Grant, particularly during deliberations, because your live tracking was so helpful. You guys are really onto it. I'm not at all surprised by the unfavourable audit opinion. I think the uncertainty around external funding is significant. But try building any plan on shifting sands and unmeetable demands and see what you end up with. This is why the government gave council some wiggle room, acknowledging that they'd obliterated several key assumptions really late in the piece. So if we approach things with a medium risk tolerance, which we do, it should be no surprise that this plan contains risky red flags. I've talked before, so I won't go into it again, about my concerns with off-books funding, but having attended the infrastructure symposium recently, I noted that other projects that have been funded in this way are cheaper than our project, and they're also not fully funded through an SPV. So that's not allayed my concerns even remotely. I think the local the government in Wellington is setting us up to fail. Get it together, Wellington. But specifically to us, $155 million, give or take, per year to run and develop our city. There's no getting around that a major component of that spend is for growth or for unfunded mandates. And that's something we just have to lump because we can't legally not do it. But I just don't see how we can afford to do it financially or risk-wise, actually. I can't do anything to change that. I'll keep working on it. So my comments today are focusing on where we did actually have influence and to reflect on what we've built. And I'm especially pleased with the amount of infrastructure renewals and capital spends. The yes to this, focusing on what's going to happen just in the next 3 years, $94 million on roading. We know we need to spend more, and we are. We're headed forward into the new financial year with a fresh outlook and fresh expectations. I think that's great. $41 million on water system upgrades and investments. This is building on the foundation that our council predecessors laid with the building of our extraordinary dam, which has set us up for the future. And this embeds our water resilience. We've already seen the benefits of our duplicate water main, so more of that. $48 million on wastewater in the next 3 years. We know our wastewater project needs to change to be affordable, and we're getting on with changing it to make it more affordable. $12 million on stormwater strategy and proactive programs in the next 3 years, because we have a case of opposing forces of needing more housing and a system at capacity. If we get more houses, we get problems. So we're acknowledging that problem and we're getting on with dealing with it. The fact is, there is no more growth that can occur without straining our infrastructure, impinging on productive land, or putting people at risk of floods or slips. And those are the hard limits that we're working to. So it's really good that we acknowledge that. $7 million over the next 3 years for biodiversity. So we're investing in our pollinator network, which our food supply is completely dependent on. $4.3 million in the next 3 years for climate change, in addition to everything else we do in stormwater, biodiversity, community funding, waste management, which also totally contribute. And $34 million on our waste streams in the next 3 years, including the chance to completely review and potentially reimagine our whole waste delivery system. This is a healthy level of investment in core infrastructure that I'm really supportive of. I think the greater focus on co-funding in this particular plan acknowledges to some extent where our limits are. And when we note that these might not proceed if we can't access the funding for them, it is healthy and good to acknowledge your limits in this way. We've got to be prepared to say no if we can't make it work, instead of trying to make it work at all costs. Finally, a focus on people and social activities which build cohesion and resilience is something I'm really proud of in this plan. Without libraries, safety, community support, housing, food security, youth, seniors, disabled, multicultural, this is money well spent, and we will all collectively be stronger for it. And for our people, investing in the development of the leadership of the organisation is something that I wholeheartedly support, and I hope we become the council to work at in the whole nation, because we tackle things head on and we have a great culture and we invest in our people to be brilliant leaders and experts in their field. Overall, though, to me, this long-term plan is about digging in and getting on with dealing with what we've got to deal with. And of course, I'm appalled at the financial burden on our community now and in the future. It's ridiculous. But I'm also conscious of the benefits that come to our community through spending on infrastructure, which is never cheap, no matter when you do it, and it will only get more expensive if we kick it down the road. I also believe we're making excellent use of the time and the reprieve that we've been granted from cyclones and other weather events. We aren't dealing with the setbacks that some other councils are, and we're using that wisely to dig in and get on with strengthening our foundations and make sure that our people have access to the services and the facilities that they need. And we're also forging forward with strong partnerships and relationships and a diverse economy and a fair amount of momentum. So basically, apart from crazy expensive growth and crippling unfounded mandates from government, I know the people of Palmerston North will benefit from this plan, and they will be stronger for it.
Can I just get you to
Yep, I'm finished.
wrap up? Thank you. You could have gone. You could have gone another 10 seconds if you wanted to. Yeah. Councillor Barrett.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and colleagues. I will try to stick to time here. Long-term plans are a really powerful truth test. They're a truth test of what a community actually values and what we don't value. And in this particular long-term plan cycle, with strong community input, we have answered that test with what is now our best collective effort in this long-term plan. A plan that, in my view, will serve the whole of the city well, despite some cuts going too deep. And I'd note in particular around the active transport space. In my view, a balanced and efficient transport network is far more than a nice to have. It is an essential part of a thriving future for our city. I did want to pick up some of the themes around commentary that's really been quite relentlessly driven to the fore around cost, around rates, around debt. In my view, it's quite unhelpful and in fact unfair to our community to continue to trot out costs and debt without important pieces of context. So yes, we are seeking and planning $136 million in rates in the coming year. But what's the context on that? Well, first, if you break that down, that's less than $5 a person a day. And I think most people would actually accept that for $5, it's worth having unlimited water out of your tap. It's worth having the toilet do what it needs to do. It's worth having a transport network. It's worth having a city that actually provides everything that this city provides. We can also reflect on that $136 million in terms of what the actual property value is in this community, which is $32 billion. So that's less than 1/2 of 1% of the property value in this community that underpins a $6 billion economy. I'd call that value for money any day of the week, and I would encourage colleagues to reflect on the whole context to keep the balance in there around costs and benefits when we have these discussions with the community. Debt, yes, there is around $1.5 billion in additional borrowing. There is a move in equity from $2 billion to $4 billion. Most people that I know would be quite happy to borrow $1.50 if they could get $2 back. That's what we're doing with and on behalf of this community. So again, we need to have balance in here. We are borrowing in some uncertain ways, and I am concerned about that, and acknowledge colleagues' comments around the off-balance sheet approaches. And we will test that and see how it runs. I think we're far better to make those kind of challenges our primary focus and be prepared to take some risks and respond as we find our new ways there, rather than to try to have some sort of austerity approach that would cut all of that essential infrastructure out of our future. We as a council voted quite happily for a medium risk appetite around finance. Quite happy. I think we're probably unanimous on that point around having a medium risk appetite. It is no wonder then, to me, that the auditor has picked up, and I do value and appreciate their input. It's no wonder. An auditor does not have a medium risk appetite. They should not around finance. They should have zero. I get that. So yes, there's an adverse opinion, but the reality is that we as a council have acknowledged that we need to accept some risk in the finance space so that we can continue to meet the needs of this community. And I think this plan serves us well in that regard. Some really good things in the plan. Great to see some KPIs with some measurables actually coming into them. Still perception-based, but better than nothing. Great to see some emissions projections over the 10 years. That's a really good start as well. Did want to acknowledge and appreciate the community voice here, what has been through a very long process, particularly those early written inputs from stakeholder groups. I think were quite useful scene setters to help staff and ourselves, but as well the 1,441 people who took the time to write in and share their concerns. And we did, I understand, or recall, make over 50 changes in those 3 days of deliberation. So again, Mr. Mayor, a really good example of where we listen to the community, we make changes, and it is the better for it. I do want to thank the staff who worked so long and hard in support of council on this. In particular, Andrew Boyle, you've guided us through this journey a number of times, and it is greatly appreciated, your efforts in this regard. And really pleased with where this has gotten to, and would commend it to all colleagues to vote in support. It is a good package overall. It's our best collective effort on our city's future. It will serve the community well. It deserves our full support. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Bowen.
I was just settling in for all of the talk there. I'm not going to go through the whole thing and talk about the bits I like and I don't like, because you're running the timer and we've only got 5 minutes. It's been a huge effort, and like others, I want to acknowledge the effort of our staff in that. It feels massive to us, and we recognise that we come quite late into the piece. You say, the king is dead, long live the king. Well, this LTP we're about to put to bed, and that means in a couple of months' time we'll start work on the next one, and that's on you. Sorry, Andrew. Andrew just looked depressed at that thought. But that's the reality of it. The long-term plan process is absolutely huge, and where we land ourselves today is reflecting on all the work, all the discussion, all the voices that have come together for that. And our voices within that, and I'm encouraged by colleagues who've talked about this as our collective response to those voices that we've heard. Absolutely, we have a variety of opinions around the table. We've all advocated strongly for certain views, certain things that we each hold dear. We've done our best to convince our colleagues of that. We've done our best to take our community with us on that conversation, but where we land today is the collective sum of that debate. And I didn't get everything I wanted, and I gave away more than I wanted to in some situations, but that's democracy. And probably to misquote Churchill, it's a terrible system, but it's the best one we've got. There are a couple of things that I am delighted about that came through that I wasn't really expecting. A heritage plan was something that we heard clearly from our heritage community about, and we've been able to pull that out of our existing plans and give it its own space. I'm really delighted as we move into a new rating system that we've also been able to balance that with the rates remission financial hardship for residential ratepayers as a result of changes to the rating system policy, which is a small thing hidden away in all of our documents, but something that I think is really important in recognising what we hear from our community is sometimes the consequences might seem small in the macro environment here, but to a person who's feeling that, if there are genuine financial hardship caused by our decisions, then we've found a way to work with our community to address that. It won't be perfect, but it is something that we've done that we've not done before. And I did want to highlight that in our conversations today. I think there's been an interesting conversation about special purpose vehicles and how we maintain line of sight. I think, as others have said, this is only going to get more challenging. As we were at the infrastructure symposium last week and heard the minister speak about the government direction towards greater focus on user pays, to tolling roads where we build new roads, to installing water meters all over the country. Rates are just going to be a decreasing part of the cost of infrastructure that lands on our community, and we'll want to keep an eye on those affordability questions more generally. I think for me, this long-term plan, probably like all the long-term plans I've been involved with, has been a community conversation about cost versus value. And that's what this boils down to all of the time. It's sometimes easy to talk about the dollars and cents, and it's easy for people to understand how much that's going to cost them. But the challenge for us as elected members, the challenge for us as a council, is to lean into the value proposition of what we do, the value that we offer to our community, the great services and facilities our community gets out of the things that council uses ratepayer money and other sources of income to achieve. I'm really proud of where we got to. It wasn't easy. Particularly, I found value in the sector lead conversations that we held, being able to gather groups of people there together to really engage in a backwards and forwards, not just a presentation of facts. But that really added a richness to the debate for me, and I'm delighted that we've been able to respond as well as we have to the concerns, the diverse concerns that came up in the different conversations that we're having. So I will happily and proudly support where we've got to with this LTP. Thank you.
Councillor McLeod.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just also to add my voice to the debate, I just want to thank also the staff and the Chief Executive for the work that they've done on this. And I also want to take the opportunity to also thank the community for engaging with the process and providing feedback on how we could have improved the proposed LTP plan that we sent out to the community. I think we can all agree that the many views presented to us, whether oral or written oral and written submissions, have enriched this experience and also given us a different perspective. And as we made some of those decisions or budgetary considerations, I want to support the recommendation before us, acknowledging the financial strain on household income. I'm incredibly conscious of the impact that our decision-making throughout this process has on individuals, families, organizations, and businesses in Palmerston North. And also with petrol prices going up, mortgage rates, and the price of other goods and services also rising. So I totally appreciate that household incomes or households are doing it tough in this time. However, I'm also cognizant of the fact that council is not immune to the unpredictable effects of the global economic downturns that everyone is currently experiencing, caused by international events that are outside of our control and have also contributed to a number of issues that local government is actually facing at the moment, which is ranging from construction and supply chain issues, cost increases, skill shortage, and also the interest on our debt. I'm not going to go into the nitty-gritty of what I liked or didn't like in this plan, but I just want to keep it general and also brief. In making this budgetary consideration, I think my focus, and I also like to believe that the focus of my colleagues here around the table, has always been around striking a good balance between affordability and the need to provide essential services and improvement across our city. And I understand that many of our student councillors probably, expected more cuts, and others wanted more spending. But I believe personally, the way that I voted, it was about striking a balance between keeping rates as low as possible and ensuring that we make financially sustainable decisions. And it's also worth pointing out that all councils around the country are operating in a constrained economic and operating environment. And Palmerston North is not the only one facing rates increases. And in comparison to other councils, just like the mayor's outlined today, we are actually conservative to the figures that we're actually seeing around the country at the moment. And if anything, or if I have any frustration, it is with the constraints around the local government funding model that we currently have, that we're currently operating under, and the lack of clarity around many of the reforms currently in play at a central government level, and cabinet pushing more responsibility on local government without considering funding impacts on councils for the proposed policy decisions. And one message also that I'd like to send out is simply that we do not just allow rates to go up for the sake of rates going up. And I just want to reiterate that rates go up because of the increasing cost of councils to public services and maintaining and upgrading critical infrastructure. So that's a key message that I also want to send out to the community. We are all ratepayers, and we just don't raise rates for the sake of raising rates. In closing, I also want to thank my colleagues for the civil debate around the table. I think it's been this long term, it's my second one, but I think this one has been the toughest, I have to say, especially operating under these constrained economic environments. But we've kept it very civil, and when you're actually bringing 16 elected members together with diverse and conflicting views, this can actually present a challenge, as we've seen in other councils. But we've navigated this process very well, as was clearly outlined by Councillor Dennison earlier on. And we've navigated this process with class, with respect for staff, and with deep appreciation for the community, for community voices that we've heard throughout this process. So I would like to just end it there and outline that I'm going to support this on those bases. Thank you.
Councillor Naylor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I acknowledge, as others have, the huge amount of work from officers and colleagues around the table in this very long process. At the end of May, after listening to our community, I was feeling slightly positive about the fact that we did make some progress in responding to what they were asking us to do, which was to reduce costs. And then at the beginning of June, and having a look at that in all its entirety, it became very clear that the impact of those decisions at the end of May was really just making a very small dent in what is a huge plan with some huge costs. I've come to the conclusion that where we've landed is quite out of step with what our community was asking of us. Our community is more than ever before laid it out very clearly, the impact that if we proceeded with some of this level of costs, what that would mean for them. And, I won't go into reminding you about that, what that looked like for some people, except to say, the value of Councillor Bowen talked about, cost versus value. There's no value in something that someone can't afford. If it means they have to sell their house, or if it means they can't put food on the table, there's no value there. So, yes, there are some things that are out of our control, and yes, there are some things that are inside of our control. And what is inside of our control are the decisions that we make about what services we provide. And what this plan includes is a whole lot of increase in level of service, particularly in the capital new space. Just in the next 4 years, we've got 356 million of capital new stuff. That's stuff we could have included or we could have waited to consider down the track. Some of the really sensible feedback from our community was, please hold off the unnecessary spending now, get nature calls sorted, and then consider that stuff later. Instead, we're including a whole lot of new stuff in the next 3 to 4 years, whilst having this big uncertainty around some very big ticket items in the later years. I don't think that's sensible or prudent. So I am disappointed to say I won't be able to support this plan. I don't believe it's what our community was asking. There's many people in our community that cannot afford a 30% increase over the next 3 years. There's plenty of people in our community who have said they cannot afford that $1,000 or more for nature calls. And I'm really disappointed with the decision being overturned to reduce the nature calls at the 10th of June meeting. Now it's just a light touch, according to the steering group minutes. We needed a significant shift. We needed a significant change there. We added 150 million in on the 10th of June. So, our community asked us to stick to basics and keep costs down. We simply haven't done that. We've got $1.6 billion worth of new stuff in that plan. And yes, we can make decisions down the track. But we've got a lot of this spend is in year one. Things like 17 million at the arena, when we've just spent 17 million there. That's progressing within the next 3 years, along with many other nice to have or optional programs. I won't be supporting recommendation 3, the revenue and financing policy. 2 main reasons. I think we didn't need to increase our debt to revenue ratio to 250% just yet. I think what that does is creates a whole lot of space for us to fill with new stuff that our community can't afford. And the second issue that I have with our revenue and financing policy is that what we used to have, which used to be called a rates affordability limit, has now been changed to annual increase in rates requirement, and it includes things like extra debt and interest. So it's not an affordability measure at all, and I think we've, as a council, just lost any sort of ability to think about having an affordability for our community. Back in April, the Mayor in his Guardian article said, if you believe the council is living beyond its means or spending too much, please identify specifically where we can cut back. People gave us that feedback. And as a majority council, we haven't been willing to look at our levels of service in terms of our operational spend, and that's where we've really...
Sorry, Councillor, can you...
Okay, I think I've said. So, Mr Mayor, if you could just separate recommendations 3 and 7, that would be great. Thanks.
Will do. Councillor Arnott.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I'll be briefer than some of my other colleagues. Look, I'd also like to thank officers and all the staff behind the scenes that have put so much blood, sweat and tears into this process. And I guess as a councillor a disgruntled citizen that stood on for council 18 odd months ago, I still feel a bit disgruntled in some ways. Lots I do support, lots I don't. And, for me, Audit New Zealand, alarm bells, $1,000 over 30 years, not good. For me, there's still too much uncertainty. Too many citizens, too many ratepayers hurting, on the bones of their backsides. So, like I said, lots I do support, but I can't support this. Thank you.
Councillor Johnson online.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Well, it certainly has been an extraordinary long-term plan, hasn't it? It's been extraordinary in lots of ways. And I think I'll try not to repeat things that other people have said, but I think it's been the plan for which elected members have been under the most pressure, both in terms of the amount of work and the stakes have been very high. And I've certainly felt that pressure, particularly before Christmas. But again, you know, with the days and days of hearings, with very little break in between. So I'll just acknowledge other colleagues and staff. I think it's been a particularly difficult process and particularly stressful this time round. One of the things that has added to my personal stress has been the level of abuse and intimidation that I and I think some other elected members have experienced from members of the public. And that's a new thing. I'm not going to sugarcoat it and pretend it hasn't happened. I think we need to acknowledge that this is the first time really that, it's certainly the first time that I've been physically assaulted by a member of the public at a consultation event. It's certainly the first time in which people have stalked me, both online and physically outside my house. It's certainly the first time in which I've been subjected to abuse to my face, as well as online and in the chamber. So I think all these things need to be acknowledged. There's been a definite mood amongst the public, not all, but a significant portion, which has been very difficult to deal with. And on top of that, I've had some concerns really about the way that some elected members have engaged with the public. And certainly when you hear an elected member's line being fed back to you from a member of the public during submission, it does raise a concern in your mind as to how independent that submission is and how much help that person has been given to write it from the elected member in question. So, putting those comments aside, I'm not happy with this long-term plan either. It sounds like nobody is really. My concerns are around the fact that I felt that we made some very significant cuts to programmes before Christmas, before we went out to consult on this plan. And then another whole round of cuts were made through deliberations, and some of them went too far. I was deeply disappointed that the multicultural hub that had been proposed to be funded out of the Better Off funding was cut. And instead we've ended up with some officers down the bottom of the council. That's not the vision that the multicultural community had for a multicultural hub. I was also disappointed with the rates. You know, the change to capital value so slowly over 3 years, where we could have given some ratepayers relief, much more relief in the first year. So all in all, I'm not very happy either. In terms of community projects and funding, many of the capital projects were scaled back, were deferred. There were many programmes that were actually cut entirely before we even got to consultation. So I'm not really at all happy with this long-term plan. I haven't actually decided yet whether I shall vote to support it. But I just want to say, in answer to some colleagues who say that we haven't done enough, I think we've cut far too much, actually. I'm very disappointed. And in terms of affordability, it sounds a lot when you talk about percentages, but if you actually talk about how much extra per week it is, it's not a huge amount compared to the services that we provide. And I believe, and I always have believed, that it's better for everybody to put money in to provide services for everyone than it is for people to fund themselves if they can afford it. And if they can't afford it, well, they just don't get those services. So it just comes down to your philosophy, colleagues, really and truly. So I'll just leave my comments there. I think I'm not happy with where we've landed up, probably for different reasons to some of you.
Councillor Finlay.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Again, I'd like to thank the staff for the hours they've put into it, and also councillors for the hours you put into it. I know it's not been easy, and a lot of people have been very upset. But one of the things that's upset me more than anything else, people on fixed incomes, after this rate increase, some of them will be paying $150 to $160 per fortnight on a rates bill. And if you're on a superannuation, that's an awful lot of money that you have to spend on just rates. And you have to cut somewhere to be able to pay your rates. So you have to cut food maybe. And you got the old-fashioned analogy of a loaf of bread a week. Well, this is not a loaf of bread a week, it's 10 loaves of bread a week. Great Power New Zealand is concerned about the amount of older people who are being forced into taking rates referrals and putting themselves into lifetime debt to their death. Unfortunately for the councils, they don't get the money, they have to wait. But it's becoming a problem around this country. Older people have been forced into looking at alternative ways of making money, taking in flatmates. There's a whole lot of other things, forced to sell their houses. Rising costs in New Zealand are affecting everybody, but people on fixed incomes are suffering the most. Will I support this rate increase? Yes, I will. For one simple reason, if we don't, the repairs and the maintenance and the renewals will be put on hold. And we can't afford to do that because look at Wellington. You keep doing that, all you end up doing is increasing the costs later on. But we as a council, in fact, the government has got to find a way of relieving pressure on people on fixed incomes, because it is now critical. And throughout this country, not just Palmerston North, older people particularly are suffering dramatically. And I've heard some of the stories, and I'm not going to share them, but we have to address it somehow, either the government or the local bodies. And the most ridiculous thing in this country is this: we pay a tax on a tax. All our ratepayers are forced to pay 15% extra on their rates because the government takes GST off it. That would be the most cruelest situation I can think of in a whole rate system. Thank you.
Councillor Harpender.
Thank you. I wasn't going to speak, but I have listened to everybody else. We have done a lot of hard work. Thank you to all the officers for all their work, and thanks to the Chief Executive for his work that he has done on this and his team. We've done a lot of hard work, and as Councillor Johnson has said, you know, in December we did a lot of work before we put out the long-term plan, and then we did a lot of work through the consultation process, and I do acknowledge all that work that we have done through that consultation process. And we've done a lot of work with the community in terms of talking to them throughout the consultation process, whether it was in a council mandated meeting or it wasn't a council meeting. So we have had lots of discussions with people in the community, and I think we've heard a lot of what they want and what they don't want. I do think the change that we have put together is mainly due to what our community want. And for that reason, I will support this long-term plan going forward. It is, as Councillor Michelard said, it is something that most of us can't stomach because most in the community won't be able to afford it. But we, as Councillor Finlay just said, we have to do it because we've got to maintain what we've currently got. And that is the key point of this. If we don't maintain what we've currently got, then it will crumble. So I will support it going forward, and I hope you all do as well. Thank you.
Councillor Meehan.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I too wasn't going to say much, but I need to acknowledge the officers for their work, colleagues for their work, and just say that I can't support this because of the cry we're hearing out there on affordability. And simply, yes, we've tightened the belt, but not tightened the belt enough. And we all live within budgets, and we all have to tighten when we can't reach that budget. So we have the power to decide what people will pay in rates, and that we've just gone a little bit too far. And I understand all the reasons why and all the bits and pieces, but I don't think we're just dealing with core business here. And what we need to do, we've still got some pretty things in there. And on that alone, people that have come and spoken to us about not being able to afford, what it will do to them, as we've heard from others, Councillor Wood, Councillor Naylor, Councillor Finlay, have all summed up those most affected by this. And we cannot sit here, I cannot sit here, sorry, and vote for this with hand on heart, knowing that people are going to really suffer out there. It's all very well for those who can scrape or do a little bit or sell a car, one of the 3 or 4 they got, or whatever, but others just can't afford it, and we need to think of those people. Thank you.
Deputy Mayor online.
Tēnā koe, Your Worship, o te rā tēnā koutou. And I too just want to acknowledge the staff, the council staff, the councillors, the public who made submissions, in fact all of the people in our city who this will impact. It's been a massive task, an absolute challenge over many months, and I want to say that I will be supporting this. I felt that Councillor Zabellin and Councillor Barrett were very much aligned to my thinking. Everything they had said I agreed with. I also acknowledge Councillor Dennison, because I too felt that people around the table, although we had differing opinions, behaved and conducted themselves in a way that was respectful, and that's an important thing at all times. Palmerston North City is growing, and if we don't spend money, we're going to have, as Councillor Lou Finlay had said, problems just like Wellington City and other places. But I really am quite, I suppose, disillusioned and annoyed at central government for the fact that they put things on local government and they expect us to do it and do beyond what they would do, and they don't provide any resourcing to back that up. So for me, that's a huge issue, and I think everyone should be up in arms. We know that every council in the country is struggling with this. Councillor Zabellin's comment that central government are possibly setting us up to fail, I think there's something in that. And the other thing I want to say is, Councillor Johnson, we should all be up in arms at the very fact that she and others were targeted by people who were malicious and nasty when all she was doing was her job. And just because you work on council or in council or a councillor, elected member, you're no one's, I don't know what to say. You're not there to be booted or to be your personal safety encroached on. You know, so I think that that's a really despicable thing. And if those people were sort of listening to this and saying, oh, well, I can do what I want to do, no, you're being unlawful. But I do want to say I'm going to support this because I know that we're in part of an economic cycle. It's not good, but we do have to push on, or else if we don't, things will get far worse for our city. And we all are sitting around the table for the right reasons. We all want Palmerston North City and our residents to thrive. And I think Councillor Barrett said we've landed at a place that's sort of on balance, as good as we can do. But obviously, we're going to be looking at this. We're not going to be, that money that we might have assigned to things isn't a target. It's there. We would have to review things if we needed to, because we're solutions focused as well. So that's my comments, and ngā mihi kia koutou. Thank you, everyone. Kia ora.
Thank you, councillors. Look, just as a right of reply, I'm not going to deny it's been a real challenging LTP, and I think everybody's comments have signalled that as well. But actually it's what we can influence and what we can actually do ourselves. I think Councillor Zabellin's comments around shifting sands, how apt is that? It's almost monthly that things are changing from our colleagues in Wellington, and we do have to do something at some stage as a sector, because we are getting everything is getting lumped on to local government, and I suppose we're not great at telling people the value of their rates and what we actually we deliver and the value proposition of that. Imagine if there wasn't local government, or if we just did infrastructure and that's it. I think you'd find the social cohesion, community cohesion of your city would start to become quite volatile almost immediately. So local government delivers 50% of these services, but we're certainly not funded anywhere near that. In fact, we're in the vicinity of 12%, 10 to 12% at best, when you take the total tax take and rates take. A very interesting figure where the average rate here is around $2,950, but the average tax was $37,000. Now, do the math. It just doesn't work out. Look, the vast majority, some have mentioned the cost too, and I get that, but it's not just all about the costs. Utilities, power and insurance, they're over 30% in 1 year. And yet here we are debating 10% or 10.1%. Most of the plan too, the vast majority, and we have listened to people. I push back on that we haven't listened, we have. I admit some of you feel like it needs to be a lot more, but we hear around what is the basis of this plan. Well, it's infrastructure, it's renewals. Again, some of the councillors have talked about that in greater detail, but around roads, pipes, networks, maintaining what we already have, really, really important. But also it's about our people. And we can take either a holist infrastructure approach and forget about our people, but I don't think we want to do that, and our community as well. So that is around supporting a library service, which is one of the best in New Zealand. It is about having recreation and some sporting facilities, not at all costs, it's actually at a very, very minimal cost, certainly compared to other city councils around New Zealand. And also, while other councils are cutting community funding, we've at least maintained what we're doing in the programs that we provide for our people. Now, it's the value, I think, of rates and for our wider community, and I think that sometimes gets lost in translation around percentages and debt and increases, etc. Where have we landed? Well, councillors, it's around balance. It really is, and it's a balanced conversation that we're having. And I think we've found, in really challenging circumstances, the right balance. So, again, appreciate everybody's views, appreciate the officers again, and of course our residents and the submitters that made the effort to submit to us. Have we listened? We absolutely have. We've tried to work out the best possible outcome for the city. So I will ask you to vote, please. No, she wanted to. No. So we'll do everything bar 3 and 7. So we'll do everything bar 3. Was it councillor bar 3 and 7? Okay, sorry. We will do number 3 first, which is around adopting the revenue and financing policy. So we will vote on number 3 only first. And that has passed 12 votes for and 4 against. All right, we'll do everything else in a catch-all 1 to 9 except number 7. So that is basically the plans, the strategies, the various policies, except number 7. If you could vote, please. Plus 16 votes for and none against. And then finally is number 7, around adopting the LTP in its entirety. And that has passed 12 votes for and 4 against. All right, councillors, we'll move through to number 9 now, which is around the resolutions to authorise the borrowing. That's page 149. I'll take that as being read, unless officers want to speak to that. And recommendations there, following on from our LTP, and I'll paraphrase here, is that Council authorise the Chief Executive to borrow in accordance with the delegated authority up to 54 million, the borrowing of additional term debt by way of bank loan, loans or credit facilities or other facilities, or the issue of stock for borrowing secured by debenture trust deed. 2, Council note that the purpose of the borrowing is to carrying out and continuing programs identified in the LTP 24 to 34 for the 24-25 year. The Council note that any sums raised and subsequently on-lent to the Palmerston North Airport pursuant of a loan agreement between the Council and the company will be in addition to the sums that are raised for the Council's own funding purposes. The Council note the security of the borrowing may be charged over rates under the debenture trust deed if the Chief Executive considers appropriate. Number 5, the Council note that the benefits of the borrowing are that they are to enable the Council to carry out programs identified in the long-term plan while spreading the cost of these programs over time to recognise future benefits. The risk is that interest rates may vary in future, resulting in higher debt servicing costs to the Council. Number 6, the Council approve that having regard to the Council's financial strategy, it is prudent and reasonable to enter into the proposed borrowing for reasons set out in this report. And number 7, the Council note that the raising of the borrowing will comply with the Council's liability management policy. And finally, number 8, that Council note the decision to borrow up to 54 million is a significant decision within the parameters of the LGA 2002 and is satisfied that it has been in compliance with decision-making consultation requirements of the Act. All right, I'm happy to move that, seconded by Councillor Dennison. Are there any comments? All right, we will vote, please. And that has passed 11 votes for and 3 against. Okay, we move through to number 10, which is around the setting of the rates for the 2024-25 year. And again, from our Strategy Finance Manager, Steve Patterson, it's on page 155. I'll take it as being read, but if there are any questions, then I'll ask you to come up, Steve. There being none, I'll just read out the recommendations, which I'll move that Council adopt the resolution to set the rates for the 2024-25 year, Attachment 1, and that Council note that the setting of rates is a significant decision within the parameters of the LGA 2002 Act, and that it is satisfied that has been in compliance with the decision-making consultation requirements of the Act. Look for a seconder. Thank you, Councillor Dennison. Are there any comments? Councillor Barrett.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and colleagues. Just briefly on this, it is usually described by Mr. Who gets to the table as simply mechanical and following on from the substantive decision made through the long-term plan. And in fact, it is mechanical, but in this case, a change during the long-term plan has kind of reprogrammed the machine. And it's reprogrammed the machine in a way that will be, for many in our community, I'd say probably the most consequential decision coming out of this long-term plan, which is around the rating system and finally starting a journey from land value to capital value. We do not yet know how far that journey will go, but we do know that in starting it, we are beginning to create better alignment between what we ask people to pay and the ability to pay. Just wanted to briefly acknowledge Councillor Johnson for her hard and dedicated work over a number of years to set us out on this destination and get us heading in this direction, as she's indicated, not at the pace that she would like to see. And yes, we could have well started this in 2016, but 2024, at least we're there now in making a start. And also to acknowledge Councillor Dennison for helping us find pace in terms of the journey ahead. So thanks to colleagues on this, and I think, again, this is a very historic moment for the council, so I did want to comment around that in terms of what the community will be seeing in terms of this change in the rating system.
Okay, we will vote, please. And that has passed 13 votes for and 1 against. All right, we'll move through now to number 11, which is around the adoption of the Waste Management and Minimisation Plan. And again, that's page 163. I'll take that as being read of our papers. And it's actually 165, sorry. And just want to acknowledge the submitters to this. And it's around recommendation to council that we adopt the Waste Management and Minimisation Plan 2024 Attachment 1. I'm happy to move that, seconded by Councillor Dennison. And again, just acknowledging the submitters to it and the staff, especially Peter and his team for pulling this together. There being no comments, we will vote, please. It's passed 14 votes for and none against. All right, we're now through to number 12, which is around the adoption of the Palmerston North Dog Control Bylaw 2024. That's on page 193 of your papers.
Excuse me, Mr. Mayor. Sorry to interrupt. I just wondered before we move to the dog control policy, there's one small acknowledgement I'd like to make regarding the LTP. If that's okay, should I be a minute? Obviously, I want to acknowledge the work of elected members and staff, but there's one acknowledgement I want to make this morning. I'll keep this short because this is what he would expect. So Andrew Boyle, our Head of Community Planning, is retiring on the 19th of July after 34 years of service. So Andrew started with the council in 1990. He's led every LTP that we've undertaken under the Local Government Act, so that's 8 LTPs since 2004. Andrew's a quiet, humble person, which I think reflects the role of local government. I hope he doesn't mind this description. I don't think he's flashy, but he gets things done. And ultimately, sometimes while we want to strive to make improvements every time with the LTP, there is a sense of getting it done, which is always there, and Andrew's very good at bringing us back and making sure that that happens. So I just want to acknowledge Andrew's work over many years, particularly these more recent LTPs. He's a very loyal local government officer. We wish him well for his retirement. I know he's got a small biodiversity, well, I won't say small because no biodiversity project is ever small, but he's got a biodiversity project that he's going to be focusing on, and I'm really pleased that he has to put his attention to that and other more pressing things. So yeah, all the best, Andrew. As I said, I'd keep it short, which is I think what you'd wanted, which was what you'd want. And there's a few more weeks left, but just want to acknowledge publicly the work over a very long period of time.
Thanks, David. I was going to do that a little bit later, but you got in early. Well done. All right, Council, I'm just worried a bit of time here because we do need to move on, but I'm pretty sure we can get through the part one part of everything. So around number 12, which is actually, our page numbers seem to be a little bit mixed up here, but it's page 169 of your papers, and it's around the adoption of the Palmerston Dog Control Bylaw 2024. And I'll take that as being read unless there are any questions. And we have some recommendations there to Council, which I'm happy to move, seconded by Councillor Dennison, and it's around recommending to Council that we confirm the Palmerston North Dog Control Bylaw 2024 is the most appropriate means of addressing perceived problems relating to dog control within the city. The form of the bylaw is the most appropriate form of bylaw, and 2, the bylaw does not give rise to any implications under the New Zealand Bill of Rights Act 1990, and number 2, that the Council adopt the Palmerston North Dog Control Bylaw 2024, attachment 1 of this report. There being no comments, we will vote, please. And that is passed. Against. Thank you. Right, moving through to our last item on our part 1 paper is around the Council work schedule. There's a memo there from our Acting Chief Executive, Mr Dyberg. I'll take that again as being read unless you want to comment to it. Other side.
No. It's not.
Other side? No, you need to swipe your card. You haven't been in this seat for a while. The side, round the side, yeah. No, on the other side? Yeah, that's it.
Got there. Thank you very much. I'm here all week. And all that just to say no further comments.
Well, we know you're in the seat, Chris, so thank you for those comments. Okay, we have the council's work schedule, which is large and a lot to do, but I'll look to move that. We received the work schedule dated 26th of June 2024, moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Dennison. If there are no comments, we will vote, please. That's passed 14 votes for and none against. Okay, we'll look to close this part of the meeting. And if we come into part two, I'm just unsure of how that's going to work with our next committee meeting starting at 1, and a few of us that aren't here in the room possibly at the end of that. So could I ask you, Councillor Isabellan, to close us out with karakia?
Me noi tātou. Te hau ki te uru, whakataka te hau ki te tonga. Kia mā ki nā kita, kia mā taratara ki tai. Kia hia ki ana te āta kura, he teo toka he tihei. Kia ora.
Kia ora. Kia ora, everyone. Look, thank you, and thanks to those online. And we will go to 1 o'clock to culture and sport, and then we'll inform what we're happening with the possible part two of this meeting, if indeed that happens today. Thank you.